Good afternoon. Welcome to the latest in the Apt webinar series, Navigating the New Aged Care Act. Today, we're covering home care and also residential aged care. This webinar will be recorded and a link will be sent out on email in about a week's time. Please feel free to forward to your family and friends who might be interested in understanding this information. My name is Lisa Haley and I'm a Senior Financial Advisor at Apt Wealth here in Melbourne, and I'm one of 3 advisors who specialise in aged care for Apt. Today we also have Michael Tran from BT Tech Services as our guru for the new home care regime. Welcome, Michael.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Importantly, the information today is of a general nature. Every person's situation, assets, and fees differ, so you should seek your own personalised advice in due course. However, it is useful, given the complexity of the system, that you build your general knowledge sooner rather than later, and that's what we're here to do today. Pre-planning gives you peace of mind for you and your family that you know what is ahead of you. You have a chance to review broader matters such as Centrelink, and is there a nominee there to help you? MyGov, is it all up to date and accessible to family? Make sure everybody knows your assets and income and have your documents in order. And this is really key. Powers of attorney, decision-making for medical, wills, etc. Importantly as well, ensure your family understands your wishes. And sometimes there can be difficult conversations to be had around expectations of care, housing, finances, etc., which are best had well in advance. We also find that there are a lot of myths that abound around aged care and home care. And so it is best to look at your particular situation rather than rely on hearsay and what others may have experienced or may think they know. Now, our number one priority for our clients is that you feel more in control for the challenges ahead. And often there is a health event that triggers consideration about home care help or aged care. But that is also the worst possible time to be trying to get your head around a whole bureaucratic system. The system has a lot of jargon, a lot of steps, a lot of delays. It's quite well known that there's often a big wait to get an assessment of your needs coming to your home or to your hospital bed. And then there's another wait to get your actual letter allocating a package to you. And then there might be another wait to try and find a service provider in your area or to find a bed free in a facility that you like. Now, when the time comes, and particularly if things become a bit more urgent, we encourage you to use a placement service. They can provide key assistance and speed things up. They can do things like shortlist providers who they think are good and have good staff. They can help you find the right home and bed for your particular medical needs. And they only charge a moderate cost for this assistance. They can help with forms, etc. Now, we encourage our clients to get in the system sooner because of all of these waiting periods and all of these delays. If you can get in with a level 1 package, regardless of whether you start to use it or not, you'll be months ahead should something happen down the track where things become urgent. It's easier if you're in the system to start scaling up and getting more help. If there's an event and you need 6 weeks of assistance with physio or something in the house, but don't need much before then, it's better you're in the system than starting that all from scratch from a hospital bed. Now, why are we even meeting today, quite frankly? Well, change is coming in this sector, and it's as a result of this 1-inch thick document, which was launched on the 12th of September of last year. And those changes were due to start actually imminently on the 1st of July, but that's recently been announced to be delayed now till the 1st of November, as quite frankly, the sector is not ready for all of the changes. Now, there are some elements that have already been put in place, but largely Canberra have been refining the rules on the fly, and providers are still updating software and processes and staffing, etc. There's much yet to finalise and to implement. So that's what Michael and I are going to be talking about today. However, it is important to realise that the changes don't impact everyone. Michael and I will use the term today grandfathered or transitional at times. So some people will get to keep their existing fee structure, or they can choose to between keeping the older system or going on to the new system down the track in due course. So these concepts we'll cover today. But quite frankly, let's take a step back. Why are the changes being implemented, well, at all? Look, we've all heard the horror stories from the Royal Commission, people waiting for their home care packages, and then something happens and quite frankly, they never get there. Or in care itself, that the supervision, the care offered, food, etc., is of a low standard. So the two key issues have been not having enough funding for facilities potentially, or them spending it on the right things, and also the quality of services. Now, importantly, when the government was putting together those aged care reforms, they found that 46% of residential care providers were running at a loss in the 22-23 year. And how that impacted was in the subsequent periods, we started to see as people left their beds and beds became available, they were actually not being placed back on offer due to a lack of staff and a lack of profit on those beds. And so this has become a major issue for the government. They do want to make sure this sector is financially viable, but importantly, that you are happy with the service that's being provided as well. Get rid of these waiting lists, get rid of these waiting periods, and to be able to get the services that you need at a quality that you need more quickly. Now, the good news, though, got to be some good news in this. The government is still paying the majority of costs, but generally speaking, fees are going to go up for many people. So with residential care, government will continue to pay the majority, 73% of costs, but it will be slightly more coming from residents. And home care, the government will continue to pick up 89% of costs. But very importantly, the government does means test in this area. What we mean by that is they will still assess and help out those with lower assets and income more than those with higher levels of asset and income. And if we look at the box there on the right, there are some examples of the modelling done by the government, that if you're asked to contribute, for example, $1 towards your home care package, that the government would be covering around $12.90 worth on behalf of full age pensioners, who are the majority of recipients of home care packages, $6 for part pensioners, but not so much for self-funded retirees. And I'll just pause here just to say that therefore, for a lot of self-funded retirees, people with higher assets, you might go, well, why do I even bother with this whole system? We would still say to you, it's good to get into the system, get a package allocated, even if you choose to keep paying for your, cleaner or gardener or services privately yourself, just in case something changes into the future. You want to be in the system, known, rather than starting from scratch when things become more urgent. Now, the other piece of really good news is the government still maintains the safety net for Australians. And you might not be aware, but 40% of beds in Australia are kept for what is termed low means people. So even if you have absolutely no assets at all, you can get into care, you can get your bed, and all you pay is a basic daily care fee. So this is a fantastic system of protection for all Australians. Once you have that bed, that is your bed for the future. Now, this can also apply, just for the record, to couples sometimes if you might have a home, but not so much in the way of other assets. Maybe you're a part pensioner or a full pensioner as a couple. Often when the first person moves in, because the home is protected for the remaining person still living there, you might find that the first person moves in as a low means resident as well. So these are great protections, and that element is not changing with the upcoming rule changes. Now, that date when that big fat document hit the table on the 12th of the 9th, this date is an important date, and Michael will talk about grandfathering again in more detail later. But with those changes announced that are coming in soon, government modelling suggests that about 50% of Australians going into residential care will end up paying more than under the current regime. Okay, and with home support, look, it will vary quite a bit. Michael will talk to the complexity of the system moving forward, but we can say for many people it is likely that they will pay additional amounts towards their home care services. But very importantly, this grandfathering concept and transitional fees does mean we don't all need to panic. If you're looking after someone's finances or helping them and they're already in residential aged care or imminently moving in, they will be grandfathered, for example, and Michael will talk to home care packages and the grandfathering there. Now, grandfathering, this whole term, if there's an action item to come out of today and you're not yet looking at residential aged care, it's about home care. Maybe you've got a package, or maybe you're thinking about into the future, you might establish one, or you might be a family member thinking about, mum, dad, aunt, uncle, and helping them get into the system. Importantly, identifying if you're a grandfathered person could save you substantial fees. And the key trigger here is if you have a home care package on that date, that 12th of September, then you may be a grandfathered person. Even if you're not using it, even actually if you're in the queue waiting to be allocated, you would qualify for grandfathering. Now, what we're finding is a lot of people think, oh, I'm not using a package at the moment, I don't have one. But in fact, previous hospitalizations, might have been 5 years ago, something occurred, you went to hospital, you had some recovery period, some rehab afterwards. Often a home care package was allocated to you, whether or not you remember or whether or not you actually ended up using it, or just family or private sources helped you out for that period of time. So as an action item, if you are unsure, you can call My Aged Care and see if you have an old plan sitting there in the background. Now, unfortunately, there are 2 different programs in place at the moment. Commonwealth Home Support Program might be familiar to some of you. If you are on that lower level of service, that does not qualify for grandfathering. But where you're unsure, make sure that you call My Aged Care and check if you could potentially be one of these grandfathered people, because it could save you substantial fees. So that's sort of the bigger picture stuff. Let's now start focusing on the 2 different types of care. I'll focus on the residential aged care first, and then Michael's going to come back talking about the home care services, the change of streamlining of services, and the change of name. Now, residential aged care, just to clarify, this is for when it's no longer safe to live at home. And so you move into a residential aged care facility. And look, sometimes that is preceded by a particular event. For example, a fall at home, you go to hospital, and the staff assess that it is not safe for you to return home. And so then there's a process of rehab, finding maybe a temporary respite bed, and then taking steps to move in more permanently. Sometimes it's also just your choice. So you're assessed, that you're eligible to move into care, that the assessment team feel it's the right place for you to be moving forward. But it's your choice as to when you make the move. And this is sort of really a key reason for this seminar today, that if you are on the verge, you're thinking about moving in, you can move in, or you think if you get an assessment soon, you would qualify to move in, this could be the right time to consider accelerating and making the move. And that's because if you move in before the 1st of November, you will qualify for the existing rules. So this is kind of the number one question I'm having at the moment. Do I move in now, or do I wait until after November? Now, most of the modelling we have looked at with our technical teams, look, it's theoretically cheaper to be on the old fees. So the existing system, to move in now. And that is generally the case up to the 4-year mark in care. Hate to say it, but for residential care, it is true that the average stay is about 2.5 years, and most people will pass away in that sort of a time frame. So the 4-year mark comes up in the rules around care fees, etc., 4 and 5 years. And it is on the basis that many people don't last for that sort of length of time in care. So theoretically, the old system, the current system, moving in up until the 1st of November, it's cheaper on the current fees. So you might think about moving in sooner. If somebody lived, though, 5 years, 10 years, actually the new fees could be cheaper than the existing fee system. But quite frankly, how long's a piece of string? Given longevity can't be known, really, that is rarely the decision-making factor. Typically, it's other issues that you decide, or health decides when the right time is to move in. Actually, I'll just go back a step. So the residential aged care changes, there's some new jargon, there's new fees, and as I said earlier, likely higher fees for 50% of the people. So that's why this is a live issue at the moment. So the 2 key concepts that you need to know about in residential care, look, I could talk for a whole day on all the detail, but just briefly, there's 2 elements to residential care. It's about getting a room in care. This is the accommodation payment element, and you can buy or rent your room or do a combination of those things. And then there's a second element, which are the actual care costs. Okay? And the care costs are, everything from food and electricity to nursing and medications, etc. Quite frankly, it all depends on your assets and your income. Assets and income also change over the course of your time in care. So it's complex calculations. Quite frankly, seek advice from your financial planner about your initial fees and how fees might change over your stay in care. So the accommodation payment element, which is all about your room, we use the term you can buy your room, rent your room, or do a bit of both. Buying your room, the old language you might have heard, mum and dad paid a bond, right, to get into their facility. But the current language is refundable accommodation deposit. And this is, a big fat lump that you pay, and you sign a contract and you effectively buy the room. Now, those bonds, those RADs, as they're currently called, differ greatly. I've seen RADs as low as 200,000, RADs as high as 1.5 million, 2 million, right? It depends on the facility. A 2 million facility might be more like an apartment with a kitchen and a lounge area. Most care facilities, though, it's a bed in a room and maybe a private bathroom, or there are some cheaper ones sometimes with shared bathroom ensuite between, maybe 2 people. So very importantly, it's up to you, the type of room that you will choose, and that will link to the RAD that you will pay. In Victoria, the average RAD at the moment is about $500,000. Okay. You can actually look up facilities in your area on the myagedcare.gov.au website and see what rooms are on offer. Facilities often have a choice of rooms of different size and facility. You know, you might pay more to have a balcony or a bit more space in the room, those sorts of things. I would just segue off here to make an important point. I've had many, many clients who have been happy in care. I know there are the horror stories, but many clients have been, or their family have been very happy with their move into care and their experiences there. But the number one reason that I hear that somebody is happy with their care is when the facility enables easy access for family and friends to come and visit, to come and advocate, to keep an eye on things, to help out and have good relationships with the staff. So when you're selecting a facility, maybe don't just look at the local area where, you know, the resident or you are currently living, but think about who's going to be visiting and who's going to be assisting you in your stay and making that as easy as possible. It might mean you're going to end up choosing a facility across town in another suburb, you know, closest to the family who's going to be helping you out, rather than just picking the place down the road. So buying the room is an option if you've got you know, the assets to do so and you're happy to redeem them. You know, you might have money in the bank, superannuation, some shares, or it may involve selling something more illiquid like investment property or the family home. Now, for most people, though, they don't just have money sitting around necessarily. And so renting the room is a good option. And in fact, under the new rules, everyone will start renting the room on day one. And then after that, if you have a lump sum that you wish to contribute towards buying the room instead, you can do so. But moving forward, effectively, everyone starts as a renter, and then you can make decisions. Generally speaking, under the new rules, there is an important new rule, which means then even if you decide you're likely to keep renting, you may still make some small contribution towards buying the room instead, in order to trigger a particular new rule, which is the key change listed there, that there's going to be a new retention amount, or should I say, Michael, return to an old rule of a retention amount, which is 2% a year of the amount that you hand over will be kept by the facility to further subsidise your fees. And this is for the first 5 years of your stay, and then they will stop retaining the amount. So if I could compare that to where we're at the moment, with the refundable accommodation deposit, if you paid $500,000 to buy the room, when you eventually, sad to say, pass away and probate is granted on your estate, 500,000 would come back to the estate for distribution to your beneficiaries, fully refundable. Moving forward, for people moving into care after November, some amounts will be withheld, most likely on a monthly basis, adding up to this sort of 10% over 5 years. So if you did last 5 years in care, the amount that will be refunded to your estate wouldn't be 500,000, it will be more like 450,000. Okay, so this is a bit of a key change, and it does therefore mean that effectively the fees are higher, right? But this would be withheld from the lump sum, okay, rather than you needing to come up with the cash flow for this. Now, if you decide not to buy the room or only partially buy the room, instead you're renting the room, you can see in the corner of this slide, there's an interest rate that applies if you don't buy the room, and that's 8.17%. This is quite a high number, and that's how they calculate the rent on the room. So let's just use the extreme example. You don't pay anything towards the RAD and you fully rent the room, and it's a $500,000 room that rent that you'll pay over a year is about $41,000. So the 8.17% applied against the outstanding RAD. And you can do half and half. You can do, 100,000 towards the RAD and the rest paid as rent. So there's a bit of flexibility here. But the key change on this one is in the past, they would set that sort of rent amount and it would remain steady. But moving forward, in order to make it more fair compared to people paying the RADs up front, those numbers will index gradually over time. Okay, so that's a key change. So there is a bit of difference here in the accommodation payments, but again, I just want to stress if mum or dad is already in care, there's no changes. They've signed a contract, they've got their bed, they've made their negotiations, it's done and dusted. This is about moving forward after the 1st of November. Now, the care costs, also jargon changing, fees in general will be rising. So currently in the orange box up the top, and also for people who aren't yet in care, but will determine they're a grandfathered person, they will have the choice of continuing in the current fee regime. Now, basic daily care fee, whether it's the current regime or the future regime, that's the same for everyone. Everyone pays it regardless of how rich or poor you are. It's connected to 85% of the age pension. Everyone pays that. But it's the next section that depends on your assets and income, the means tested fee. And the means tested fee is, as I said earlier, complex calculation. But bottom line is those sort of fees are going to be lower than the new future fees. But there are a number of changes, okay, in relation to them. So a bit of a change of system here. New fee of hotelling contribution will commence. At the moment, the government pays this. This covers things like food and cleaning and laundry, utilities, like the basics of life. And so the government has been paying that. But in reality, you normally pay that if you were at home. So this is why the government has determined that that will now be your cost moving forward and for as long as you're in care, those basic daily things. It's the non-clinical care contribution that's the new jargon. And that element means tested. And interestingly, this element is going to have a higher lifetime cap implemented on it, and also a higher yearly amount cap indicated on it. So this is why the fee, whilst it is changing and how it's calculated is changing, the bottom line is we can say it is likely that people will end up paying higher levels of fee, higher cap per year and a higher cap over their lifetime. But an interesting new rule is that if you get to 4 years in care, this element will cease. Regardless, that non-clinical care contribution will cease at 4 years, even if you haven't yet reached those lifetime caps. And so this is why if you live a long time in care, actually the new rules might end up being better. But how long is the piece of string? So we don't really know. The last element's an interesting one. At the moment, additional services fees. This could be for Foxtel, wine with dinner, access to newspapers, etc. But what's been happening is a lot of facilities, it's not optional. So even if you're blind and you can't read the newspaper, you still have to pay for it. Even if you don't drink alcohol, you still have to pay for it. It's been a way of collecting and subsidising some additional fees for many facilities that have been running at a loss. Moving forward, they will be entirely optional and called health. And so therefore, this could be another saving. If people last a long time in care but gradually get more unwell and can't use extra services, then you can stop paying for them. So this could also be an advantage for longer term stayers of the new fee system. So a lot of changes there. Bottom line is, as I said, though, every single person has their own unique fee situation, and the fees will change over time. As you use up your assets to pay for your fees, then your fees will adjust regularly. So, but just to give you a bit of an indication, couple of different examples here. The first is somebody moving into care. They've sold the home. They've put $500,000 into buying their room. And with the money left over, they've bought a few shares. And so they've got some cash, some shares in an investment property still. That's 1.3 million in assets. The first column of numbers, the current fees, about 44,000 in fees. If we look at the second column, though, under the new rules, basic daily care fee remains the same, but have a look at the hotelling contribution and the non-clinical care amounts. They're adding up there to almost $42,000 compared to the current means tested fee of $20,000. So it's considerably higher fees per year for those means tested fees. The last fee listed there, retention amount, just a reminder, this relates to having paid the 500,000 RAD and that 9,000 actually comes out of the RAD. So not a cash flow item, but still part of the overall fees for staying in the facility. Okay. The second bunch of numbers, just the main difference is have sold the house, put more into the RAD, a bit less left over for buying shares. But the key difference here is really that retention amount, because the RAD, it was a more expensive room, and then the retention amount has gone up. So substantially more costs here. If we compare the first columns, 31,000 more in costs per year, and 36,000 per year in those second columns there. So well worth coming back to if you're on the verge of moving into aged care and permanent care. Do think strongly about potentially pulling the trigger and moving in now. Just one last key comment before I hand over to Michael. This is just a quick comment in relation to one of the reasons the fees are higher, and that's because the government has changed how quickly the fees go up as you have more dollars in assets and income. In the past, you could have quite a lot of assets before you would trigger the maximum fees under the means testing. Okay, 3 million plus a home for a single person, over $6 million for couples. Now, these are rough guides. Again, everybody's situation is unique, but as a rough feel for the numbers, quite high level of assets before you would have been paying the maximum fees. This will be changing, and much, much lower asset levels will trigger the maximum fees. And so the fees will, once they start being paid by somebody with quite moderate assets, will go up more quickly for every extra dollar that you have assessed as assets and income. So in the past, it might have only been very high net worth clients that were faced with this question, which is, do I bother filling in all my forms with the government? For most people, it made sense to fill in the forms and make sure you only paid what you had to. Moving forward, though, there may be more people who find no benefit to disclosing all of their financial information. And particularly for higher net worth clients, often the forms were quite challenging and would delay, and distract from the key of when you move into care. You want to settle in, you want to focus on your health and enjoy that process rather than be worried about filling in forms. So the forms, for a lot of higher net worth clients might include trusts and companies and all sorts of things that can be a little bit more complicated. So fair to say that when you speak to your financial advisor, it may be that this element might be a bit more simplified for some people, and filling in all the forms may not be as warranted. Over time, though, as you use up your assets to actually pay your fees, of course, you might fall under these brackets. And so over time, it may be that you still want to complete your necessary paperwork and have the government know your assets and income very clearly. So, Michael, hopefully everybody's still got the brain space to talk about home care. I'm going to pass over to you, Michael, to carry on with the new program and the new regime under home care.
Thanks, Lisa. So the purpose of the Support at Home program, or currently known as the Home packages that you might already be receiving. It's to help individuals live independently at home. We know this is the preference of the majority of people, as it allows you to stay in a familiar environment. You don't just have a room in a nursing home, as Lisa covered off with residential aged care. You also get to stay in your community with in-home support. In fact, over the last decade, what we found is the number of people using in-home care increased by 4 times. The changes from 1 November aim to increase that number again by 300,000 over the next decade. But the changes also aim to reduce wait times, to provide more tailored support with increased funding levels and packages, but it will also change the cost that participants will pay. If we go to the next slide, Lisa. So Lisa did touch on the importance of the 12th of September 2024 date for grandfathering. It's actually even more pivotal for the supported home program or home care packages. Anyone receiving or approved a package before or on this date will pay lower fees under the support at home. There is also special treatment for individuals that receive the full age pension just before the 1st of November, who will never pay any contributions towards the new program, even if they later lose the full age pension, say they only receive the part age pension, or even if they lose it entirely. So it is a very key date, the 12th of September 2024. Anyone that was approved a package or receiving a package, and if they are going to receive the full age pension just before 1 November, they'll never pay any contributions towards the supported home program. For part pensioners, Commonwealth Seniors Health Card holders, and self-funded retirees who were approved before or on the 12th of September, they will pay contributions, but at a reduced rate. I'll return to this point a little bit later. These rules apply even if a higher package of funding is granted at a later stage. It won't impact on grandfathering. Another benefit of grandfathering is that if either of these groups later moved into residential aged care, as Lisa covered off just before, they will not pay the new contributions. They'll just continue to pay the old means-tested care fees. However, as Lisa covered off at the start there, the new accommodation cost changes will apply to these people if they move after 1 November into a residential aged care. If we go to the next slide, Lisa. So how does the supported home program accomplish the goal of helping people stay at home? Well, it does so by providing subsidies to assist with in-home care costs. So please be aware that with the current home care package system, so before 1 November, there are substantial waiting times in some instances, but there are new rules from 1 November where there is an ability for the government to release an interim budget. So they are able to release up to 60% of what you're approved for, where there are excessive waiting times. So it is one way that they are addressing the excessive waiting times, but we haven't really seen the full details as to how this will operate. So I can't really give you more detail than that. The table that you see on your slide here does show an estimate of the amount of budgets or funding for new applicants to the supported home program that will be able to be used to help you continue to live at home. So for most of these figures, I do want to mention here that they may not be fully government funded. It may involve personal contributions towards these. We'll look at that a bit more closely later. A positive change to the current or the old rules is that you will only pay for an amount once you have been delivered the service. Whereas under the current rules, an amount is payable daily whether or not you use any services, but the unspent funds are tracked for you, and then you demand services out of this pool of money. So there is a bit of, I guess, a timing difference under the old and the new rules. On the slide here, we can think of the classification groups as sort of two broad groups for ongoing care. So your classifications 1 to 8. Point to note here is 10% of these figures will actually be allocated to care management. Care management involves the care provider reviewing your goals, your budget, the services, as well as coordinating workers who deliver the services. It really means that only 90% of the figures that you see on the slide here are available for other services that you are approved for, depending on your care needs and your goals. So budgets provided as well will be quarterly. At the end of every quarter, any unspent funds will carry over, but no more than 10% of your quarterly budget and $1,000. So the higher of the two figures. The last three categories on your slide there are not for ongoing, but are for set periods of time. Restorative focuses on early intervention, helping people at risk of losing their independence, aiming to reverse or slow functional decline. We usually see this granted where, let's say that there's a fall at home, all of a sudden you might need some physio. That's where you probably go on that pathway if you don't particularly have any ongoing care needs as well. End of life is unfortunately for people who are diagnosed with less than 3 months to live and wish to remain at home. Assistive technology and home modifications, you can actually receive this at the same time as the ongoing classification, so the classifications 1 to 8. You are able to use this to help you buy items to more easily complete activities you can no longer do independently, such as mobility equipment like walking sticks, walking frames, bathing devices like shower chairs, home modifications. Really, these are aiming to create a safer, more accessible home. For example, grab rails on your showers, non-slip materials on your stairs. If we go to the next slide, Lisa. So with the budget that we saw in the previous slide, you may allocate it to different services. These next three slides that you'll see are a non-exhaustive list of approved services that may be subsidized in the Support at Home program. However, I do want to stress here that the program participants are not automatically eligible for all services. You will only be able to use services that you're approved for. When you apply for an assessment, as part of that assessment, you're given a notice of decision as well as a support plan. As part of that support plan, it will list down all of the services and service types you will be approved for. Ultimately, it will depend on what your care needs are. I'll briefly cover these, but included this information for you on the slides if you want to review it later. What I do want to cover broadly here is that there are different categories of services. I'll give you some examples as well of what are included and what's not. There are general principles that underlie these lists of what is approved. They're focused on wellness, which is to build strengths and abilities to promote greater independence and autonomy, and re-ablement, which is to maintain or regain skills, improving functional capacity. So services that are specifically out of scope, these will be things that are already subsidized through other programs. So for example, the primary health system. So you're not going to see the Support at Home program cover things like your GP appointments, medicine dispensing, your dental. The other things that are out of scope are probably things that you can think of relating to more general expenses. So in the first category that we see here, clinical costs, really you can think of these as supporting someone maintaining their physical or their cognitive capabilities. These will be services like nursing or allied health services, say from a physio or a psychologist. If we go to the next slide, the next category is independence. It involves maintaining someone's ability to live independently using things like self-care, personal self-care, if they need someone to accompany them to appointments, training or direct assistance to improve digital literacy, transport to your usual activities. In terms of exclusions, there are general expenses like smart devices. So although you can use it to assist you with digital technology and literacy, it's not going to fund a smartphone, as an example. You're not going to fund your membership fees to your social activities. It does not fund travel for your holidays because these are going to be your more general expenses. The next slide, please, Lisa. The last category is everyday living. So this involves keeping your home in a livable state, allowing you to stay in it for longer. It includes things like domestic assistance, like general house cleaning, home maintenance, such as light gardening. It excludes things, however, that you would expect to usually pay for yourself. So pest control, dry cleaning, cost of groceries, gardening for aesthetics rather than for safety reasons, professional maintenance like replacing carpets due to wear and tear. That's probably a good example to give you a point of difference there. So that's not going to be included. So replacing your carpets for wear and tear, that's a general expense. But if you needed to replace your carpets because it was creating a safety issue, say it was a tripping hazard as an example, that could potentially be covered off. If we go to the next slide, Lisa. So the reason for these different categories is because there'll be different rates of subsidies that the government will pay for each of them. Those direct health related costs, such as for clinical care and your physio, your nursing, that's going to be fully funded by the government. There will be no personal contributions regardless of what your means are. Next, those that are important to support someone's independence at home will have a moderate contribution from each individual. And then at the highest contribution rate for everyday living items such as domestic assistance, because these are the things that the government would actually not ordinarily pay for at any other stage of a person's life. Contributions will also vary based on your means. So um, someone holding a degree of means that results in a part age pension or results them in being able to hold a Commonwealth Seniors Healthcare card would be expected to pay between 5 to 50% for any services under the independence category. That will increase to 17.5% to 80% in the everyday living category. Noteworthy as well is if you have someone who is permanently blind, they will currently receive the full age pension. They're actually exempt from any means testing for the age pension. However, for the purposes of contribution towards their costs for the supported home package, they will still undertake a means test to work out how much they pay. It won't affect what they receive as an age pension, but it will affect how much they will be expected to pay or contribute towards their costs for the supported home program. If we go to the next slide, Lisa. So as I touched on before, grandfathering here will be of benefit because it reduces the rates of contributions. With the range for independence dropping to 0 to 25%, whereas remember for age pensioners, you'll see at the very top line there, they'll never pay anything if they were grandfathered, unlike the previous slide where they would still be expected to pay a portion of independence. I think it was 5% there, and everyday living it was 17.5%. If you're grandfathered and a full age pensioner, you're not expected to pay anything for the support at home program. So this and the last slide do show that if you use your budget for more clinical costs, you're expected to contribute less to these fees. Everyday living costs may be something you wish to fund separately, as you pay a larger proportion of these fees under this program. So the government subsidizes less everyday living fees, or everyday living services, I should say. A financial advisor can help you assess how you make the most of your budget as well. But don't forget, the purpose of this program is to help you live independently at home for longer. And if you don't need as much clinical care, you don't need as much nursing support or allied health support, and it is still beneficial for you to use the other services to help you stay at home for longer, you probably should still. If we go to the next slide, Lisa. So we've got a lot of numbers on the last two slides, but maybe if I take you through an example to kind of illustrate to you how it will operate. So we have an example here. Susan, she unfortunately had a fall at home and it's affected her mobility. She's approved for a classification 4 package. And is approved for the following services. So she's approved for physio, nursing care, treating and monitoring her wounds, assistance with self-care and mobility, transport to her usual activities, general house cleaning, and some light gardening. As we see on the slide there, classification 4 funding provides approximately 7,500 per quarter. But as I mentioned before, 10% of this is set aside for care management, leaving only 6,750 to fund other services. If we go to the next slide, Lisa. So based on the services that Susan was approved, she agrees with her care provider to receive the following services, setting out how often, as well as the cost per hour of each. in total, almost $6,000 is allocated during the first quarter. You'll see the different categories as well that apply to each expense. You'll also note that although Susan was approved for example, things like transport to her usual activities, it's not listed here. She doesn't have to necessarily spend on all of the services that she's approved for. It just means that perhaps at a later quarter, she'll want to increase the services in that area and reduce the services in other areas. That's absolutely up to her. I've just given you an example, however, for this quarter, just to illustrate to you what she'll need to pay. If we go to the next slide. So I've taken the total for each category, and really what I want to show you is an example for someone who's assessed as a full pensioner, if they were instead a part pensioner or a Commonwealth Seniors Healthcare card holder, or if they were a fully self-funded retiree. For the part pensioner row, as we saw on a previous slide, it can actually range between the top and bottom number, so between 5 and 50% for independents. I've given you an example here. I've worked out if Susan, as a part pensioner, was a homeowner, she was single, she held $450,000 of financial assets and $30,000 of home contents. Her percentages for independents would work out to be just under 17.5%. For everyday, it works to be just under 35%. If we go to the next slide. So diving a bit deeper, let's say if Susan firstly was a full age pensioner. If she was a full age pensioner, again, this is if she was not grandfathered, so she did not receive a home care package before the 12th of September, or was approved for one, let's say she was approved for one today, then after the changes come into effect, this is what she'd be expected to pay. So based on the different services that she wanted to receive, as we saw on that previous slide, she's expected to pay just under $380. Remember, the total budget that she spent was just under $6,000. It means that the remainder of that amount, so just over 5,600, that's completely subsidized and paid for by the government. As a reminder, that she never pays for any of the clinical care. So the nursing care, physiotherapy, she won't pay any contribution towards that. As a full pensioner, she would pay just 5% of all of her independent services. That's the personal care to aid in her mobility. For the everyday living expenses, she pays 17.5%. So this was for things like general house cleaning, her light gardening. The rest will be paid by the government there. If we go to the next slide. So if she was instead a part pensioner, you can see that the cost that she's expected to pay has increased. So no longer was it $380 for a full pensioner, she's expected to pay $960 out of pocket, with the remainder being about just over $5,000 being paid by the government. If we go to the next slide, if she is instead a self-funded retiree, you can see that it jumps dramatically. So as a part pensioner, I worked out it was just under $1,000 out of pocket. As a fully self-funded retiree, she's expected to pay just under $2,500. So it more than doubles. The government as well funds the rest, so just over $3,500 in this case. If we go to the next slide, so we can see the large differences between the different proportions of what she pays, depending on whether she's a full pensioner, a part age pensioner, whether or not she holds a Commonwealth Seniors Healthcare card, as well as if she's self-funded. And this is where really there is a benefit of seeing a financial advisor who can perhaps look at undertaking strategies to help improve someone's age pension receipts, which also goes on to help them with what they would be expected to contribute towards their support at home costs. If we go to the next slide, lastly, in the table setting out the potential budgets that I had at the start there, I noted that for assistive technology and home modification, it depended on whether you had a low, medium, or high level of needs and tiers. This gives further detail. So I mentioned before, participants could be approved this package of funding together with their ongoing classification. For example, in Susan's case, after her fall, she might be approved a low level of funding for assistive technology to fund a walking frame. She might be approved home modification as well, on top of her classification 4 package, to add in non-slip surfaces on her stairs or external rails to her home. This will be on top of her ongoing services. If we go to the next slide, and I think it's back over to you, Lisa.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks very much there, Michael. So here's the key thing, and Michael was touching on it along the way. There are things that your advisor can assist you with, whether it's while things are still good and you're at home, looking to maximise things like your age pension entitlements, what strategies can be undertaken there. When might it be right to change residence is an important conversation I have with a lot of clients. If they're thinking about a move from maybe the family home into something different, looking before you make such decisions as to how that could be maximised for the wider range of issues like age pension, cash flow, etc. Um, Also, though, when we're getting closer to triggering care itself in the home or on a more permanent basis in residential care, advisors can do things like fee estimates for you. So you can start to think about how to fund fees into the future, restructuring assets. Do I sell some shares? Do I use cash in the bank? Am I drawing on my super? Do I need to start thinking about the right time to sell something that's illiquid? We like to help people get action plans in place to get things in order. So we do a check of how you're more broadly positioned. Are all your documents in order? Who do we speak to if things change and you need assistance? Is there somebody else in the family or friendship circle? We can do scenario comparisons as well. If you want to try and keep the family home, do I rent a home and how will that look? And is it affordable as opposed to selling the home, as an example? Or different assets. Do I sell my shares or do I access my super? Strategies to reduce fees. There are actually some special products that you can invest via that have favourable treatment under assets and income tests. I would caution sometimes, though, that trying to rearrange all of your affairs can sometimes have limits, given that people often do not live a long time in care facilities. So strategies exist, but should be used judiciously with other issues in mind. Hey, sometimes we have to be involved in family mediation and give documented advice just to make sure everyone is on the same page. And sometimes there are different family members who have different viewpoints on things like they want to buy the family home off mum and dad might need to sell it to pay their fees. So an advisor is a good sort of third party objective voice in the room in those examples. And of course, we can help with referrals to placement services. So to assist when the time comes in getting short lists of good providers to have assistance for temporary help in the home with good service providers, finding the right homes that have good staffing and good reviews from their residents. So lots of things that your advisor can assist with. We often help, of course, family and friends in assisting another person with their move to care, or it can be helping you looking into your situation and what your fees and what your trajectory might look like moving forward. Now, mindful of time, we do normally have a bit of a Q&A opportunity here. Only a couple of questions in the box. Thank you for those who popped in a couple of questions. I think the most important one out of those two questions there is, again, just reiterating that if mum's already in care, this is the question, mum's been in care for 4 years, will she have to pay these extra fees? Just a reminder, no. These are future related fees. So if mum's in her residential aged care, has signed a contract and has been settled in for some time, you don't need to be concerned. So thank you very much for attending today. We will be sending out a link in the next few days to this recording, as I mentioned at the start. And so if you want to reread any and re-listen to any of this information, that gives you the opportunity to do so, but also very keen for you to forward on this information to others in your friendship circles or in your family who you think might benefit from a quick overview of these changes that are coming up. Thanks, Michael, also for assisting with today, and I will let you all get on with your day. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you, everyone.